I wish we could spend all day here. The things that our education is lacking, you see that today, and you can understand the enthusiasm people have to learn new things. And this message, I think, is something that's very exciting and has a broad appeal. And as further evidence of that, consider Tom Woods, who we're going to have come up again. Tom spoke at a party event in 2010. It was June of 2010. It was the night before the state convention. And Tom came to Iowa. He brought a carload of his books, and he got up there and gave his speech, which was extraordinarily well received. Very powerful message. And he brought books to sign, and he sold out. He didn't bring enough books. He sold every single book that he brought with him to that crowd. And one of the books that he had with him on that trip was Nullification: How to Resist Federal Tyranny in the 21st Century. And that's a message that he's going to talk some more about right now. So I'm pleased to reintroduce my friend, Dr. Tom Woods.
So those of you who've heard this before, just bear with me, but I have to share this with people because that's the only way you can discuss the topic I was going to cover. I was distracted, so I wonder if somebody maybe in the back might ask my wife for a copy of the book Nullification or something. I want to show you about it. It's really fun. Thanks, Drew. Anyway, so the 3x5 card idea is as follows: that in American society, there are certain opinions you are allowed to hold, and they can all fit on a 3x5. And if you hold any of these opinions, you are not going to get in trouble from the New York Times. You're not going to get smeared on MSNBC. Thank you very much. You'll be a perfectly good American citizen in good standing. However, if you should stray from that 3x5, you should, for example, if the question is, well, we want to tax the people, so should we tax them? Should we tax their income, or should we tax their purchases? And we want to make sure we're taxing about 40% of what they earn. If you ask the question, well, wait a minute, what if we did neither one of these things? These are both pretty terrible. That's not on the 3x5 card. 3x5 card is which way would you like to collect 40% of people's income? Not whether or not you want to do it. Like, that's not on there. So you're supposed to play by the rules. And I just don't, because I think the rules are boring, and the rules are stacked against us, and the rules are written by sociopaths. Why would I want to take So, what I'm going to tell you in this next presentation is not something you're going to find on that 3x5 card. So if you have delicate ears, now's the time to leave. If you're going to be saying to yourself, I'm not sure the New York Times approved this talk in advance, then this is going to be uncomfortable for you. And in fact, pretty much everything I'm saying today is way off that 3x5. I mean, if you want to, like, the classic person on that 3x5 card would be, let's say, Bob Dole. Totally conventional and predictable. You know exactly what he's going to say about anything. Hillary Clinton, right there. You know, right on that card. And whenever she feels like she's gone over the line a little bit, like, do you remember that Lonnie Guinier incident? She had her old law school friend who was up for nomination for the Supreme Court, and then Guinier got into big trouble, and she was a lightning rod and controversial. Clinton just dropped her as a friend just like that. They walked past each other in the hallway, and Clinton just icily looked over. You're interfering with my ambitious plans for my career, Lonnie, so I don't even know you. She is safely on that card. Nothing. So, it seems to me all patriotic Americans should want to take this card and set a match to it. And that's what I'm going to do. So, what I'm talking about now is a topic that is not fashionable. It's not fashionable in any official establishment circles. However, it's a topic that is derived from Thomas Jefferson. So, I don't care that Rachel Maddow doesn't like it. Thomas Jefferson thought of it. So that trumps Rachel Maddow. And it trumps anybody on Fox News who might be inclined to be against it, because Jefferson is better than they were. Now, that's not always true. It's not that Jefferson's a demigod or he's always right. But it does mean that we ought to give at least a respectful hearing to something that comes from Jefferson. So I'm talking about the idea of state nullification. This is the idea of the view that the states have the power to refuse to enforce laws or to prevent the enforcement of laws within their borders that they believe to be unconstitutional. They can prevent the enforcement of unconstitutional federal laws. Now you can see that this is not on the 3 by 5. But it is, I think, a legitimate question, because we have lived through for I don't know how many years, a great many, where we've watched the federal government grow and grow and grow and grow, and it doesn't matter what you do. You vote for this guy instead of that one, it still grows. You hand out pocket constitutions to your friends, it still grows. You try everything and it still grows. You follow the rules and it still grows. So that's why I feel like, well, maybe we ought to try some other rule. This is not working, so why would I want to stick to it? Maybe we try something different. The worst that could happen is that state nullification doesn't work. Well, okay, it's not like we have a huge, long list of victories in the past number of years, right? So what's the harm of trying? Now, I was talking to my now 9-year-old, but she was 7. So I'm going to start this one off also with Regina. She was 7 years old, and she's dying to know what's in Daddy's book. Now, my publisher, I didn't have anything to do with the book covers because I had no design sense and no marketing sense for that. So what they did was they put, for the book nullification, the publisher put Obama here signing Obamacare into law. And he's got all your favorites here. It's like a greatest hits. We have Pelosi here, and we got Chris Dodd. Like he hasn't damaged the country enough to make I think he'd be in that monastery, but he's not. We've got Joe Biden, the very epitome of mediocrity himself. But the idea of the cover is that they stamp the word nullification right on it. So even if you have no idea what on God's green earth nullification is, it's stamped on top of these people, so you think, well, I guess I favor it. So my 7-year-old, God bless her, I love all my kids, but she's the oldest, so I can have the most sophisticated discussions with her. So she's the first one who wants to know what's in Daddy's books. What is Daddy writing? So she's dying to know what nullification is about. She gathers that it's something to do with anti-Obama. She got that. And what else? So I thought, well, I'm going to explain this to her. And I said, well, we have the Constitution. And that, in the Constitution, there's a list of the things that the government in Washington is allowed to do. And God love her, what was her first response? Before I even finished, she said, well, what if it does something that's not on the list? Well, you should ask that. Yeah, what's that? Well, that seems to happen. Well, that's what nullification is for. So the states say, no, wait a minute, that's not on the list, so we're not going to let you do it. And so she got it. All right, well, then it seems like that would be necessary. And so I thought, my 7-year-old is a better interpreter of the Constitution than the whole Supreme Court put together. I know we're on a funny schedule. I can't quite remember exactly when I started. I'll be ready so that no matter when they give me the 5-minute cutoff, I'll be able to just do 5 more minutes to cut off. So that's what the principle of it is. Where does this come from? Well, if we were to look at American history for the clearest example of the origins of nullification, we would look to the year 1798. But in a minute, I'm going to tell you that it actually goes back even farther in American history. But the year 1798 is a critical year, and some of you no doubt are familiar with those critical documents, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1798. Now, people like us are very interested in these documents. A lot of people seem not to be. When the 200th anniversary of the Virginia-Kentucky resolutions of 1798 came along in 1998, Bill and Hillary did not hold any official commemorations in the White House. That year just came and went. No acknowledgement of them. is that in that year, John Adams had signed into law the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. And some aspects of that legislation were considered to be objectionable on constitutional grounds. Particularly if you look at the Sedition Act, it would actually make it a crime to say things or write things that would bring the federal government into disrepute, specifically the president and the Congress. Now, you all remember, of course, that in the old days, the way they elected presidents was they would have the election, whoever got the most votes became the president, and whoever got the second highest number of votes became the vice president. So you'll notice that does not guarantee that the president and the vice president belong to the same political party. Of course, the Constitution did not envision political parties to begin with. So that means that you could have a kind of funny odd-couple situation where you had John Adams of the Federalist Party as the president and Thomas Jefferson, the Republican, as the vice president. So isn't that kind of funny? Well, it turns out that Jefferson didn't find it all that funny. Because when the Sedition Act was passed, you'll notice that it protects against scurrilous speech the president. He's protected by the Congress. But you can say anything about the vice president you want. You can say anything about Thomas Jefferson you want to. So, Jefferson kind of figured that this was probably not an accident. This is an attempt to protect the Federalist wings of the government against criticism. So he was kind of inclined to be against this, and so I would love to tell you all about the letters that he wrote to James Madison about this issue. I'd love to tell you about those letters, but unfortunately those letters do not exist. And the reason they don't exist is that Jefferson realized early on, after the Sedition Act had passed, that somebody, perhaps some Federalist Postmaster General, was tampering with his mail. So Jefferson can't even write, so he hasn't talked to Madison in person about this stuff, because he can't trust that his mail isn't going to be open. And Jefferson said that he couldn't decide which was worse, that the vice president can't even have free communication, or that his countrymen are putting up with this. So it was decided that what would be done is the legislatures of Virginia and Kentucky would draft resolutions, or they would vote on resolutions, condemning this legislation and laying out a path for redress for the states. And so these became known as the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Madison drafts the Virginia resolutions, Jefferson the Kentucky resolution. And they're both passed by the legislatures of those states. This was common. Remember, during the years leading up to the American Revolution, there were states that passed resolves pertaining to the Stamp Act. They would do this as a way of indicating this is the highest voice of the people of this place, and we are indicating our unhappiness with what's going on. Now, if you read these resolutions, read the Virginia one, for example, it says that the states are duty-bound to resist if the federal government should go beyond its constitutional boundaries. The Kentucky resolutions spell out the following. They say that this is a limited government that we established. It began with states delegating certain tasks to a federal government that would operate as their agent. And the states retain all powers not delegated. This is just straight out of the 10th Amendment. But then it takes it another step and it says that if the federal government should do anything beyond what was granted to it, should exercise some supplementary power, then the states should simply refuse to allow the enforcement of that law. And that's what we call nullification. Jefferson used that word in his initial draft, and in the following year, 1799, there were additional resolutions coming out of Kentucky with the word nullification in them. Now, at the time, other states were not so happy about this, particularly the New England states, where I'm from. The New England states were absolutely appalled that Virginia and Kentucky would assert such a right. How dare they? Don't they know that it's their job to just shut up and obey, and that's what makes this the great old U.S. of A.? Well, that really wasn't how Jefferson remembered the principles of the U.S., so no. And in fact, a lot of times when you bring up nullification today, what your critics will say is, well, at the time, the other states were dead set against this. True. What they don't tell you is this. The reason those states were dead set against Virginia and Kentucky was that they supported the Sedition Act. And we've got them on record. The Massachusetts House came up and said, the Sedition Act is long overdue. It is a wise piece of legislation. We need this. Connecticut, we go out, all down the list. Basically, all but one of the states that opposed Virginia and Kentucky were proposing it because they So you notice, it's funny that today, when people bring this up, they don't mention that. They leave that out. They leave out the fact that, so I want to turn that up and say, oh yeah, sure. So I'm supporting Virginia and Kentucky who thought that it might be bad to throw people in jail for criticizing the president. And you're supporting the states who are saying, rah, rah, throw them in jail. Well, you know what? I think I feel okay about my position. I put it that way. And as a matter of fact, there was even a U.S. congressman from Vermont who said something that by our standards we would consider astonishingly restrained about John Adams. And he was thrown in jail. And it was people, his constituents and some Virginians collecting the money to pay his fine for him. And then the people in Vermont re-elected him from prison. So he got re-elected while he was sitting around there rotting in jail. So this happened with good people. And the answer was, well, from Virginia and Kentucky was, we want to steer our ship clear of two extremes. One extreme would be submitting to unconstitutional laws. The other extreme would be seceding from the Union. Like, why should we have to give up the benefits of the Union? We didn't even do anything. So we should be able to stay in the Union. And so therefore, nullification is the moderate middle ground. See, I'm just being moderate here. Nullification was right on that 3 by 5 line in 1798. Well, now, where did Jefferson get this idea? You know, it's so funny to watch historians dance around this, because they hate this. Most historians are nationalists who believe that the only way society can be organized is with one power center ordering everybody around. That 300 million Americans should be governed infallibly by one city, and we can't think of any other way society can be set up. We got one guy with a bullhorn, and the rest of us obey. Historians love that, so they don't know what to make of Jefferson here. So they try to downplay it, you know, whatever. Well, he's just concerned about free speech, and he doesn't really mean what he seems like he's saying. I'm pretty sure he did mean that. It was very, very clearly stated. So how do they explain it away? They try. They try their best. And most textbooks, they'll be just a little bit about this and then just move on. Like it never really happened. It's an embarrassing moment. But actually, Jefferson got this, not because he was drunk one day and he thought, why don't we try this? Because of the contrary, he got it by looking back at the history of Virginia. 10 years earlier, Virginia is considering whether or not to ratify the Constitution. And again, those of you who watch my YouTubes, you know this material, but I do still need to talk about it. So, in 1788, Virginia is considering this important question: do we ratify the Constitution or not? And at that event, there were skeptics, so-called anti-federalists. Patrick Henry, for example, looked at the Constitution, looked at the general welfare clause, and he said, now come on. They're going to drive a truck for a loophole like this. Oh, you know, we'll just do things to the general welfare. Well, every tyrant says he's acting on behalf of the general welfare. It's ridiculous. Well, what's interesting is, what did the Constitution's friends say to Patrick Henry? Because if you want to know what did the Constitution mean, you don't go back to the Philadelphia Convention of 1787 to find out what it means. Because remember, that was held behind closed doors, and for decades afterward, people did not have access to Madison's notes of the convention. So nobody knew what went on behind those closed doors. So you couldn't appeal to the Philadelphia Convention. You appeal, says Madison, you appeal, says Jefferson, to the ratifying conventions, where the people were told what this document means. And so at the ratifying convention of Virginia, Edmund Randolph, who was governor, had a long career, governor of Virginia, became the first attorney general of the United States, said, Patrick Henry is worried about nothing, because this federal government is going to have only the powers expressly delegated to it. He used that phrase, expressly delegated. And moreover, then George Nicholas, who became the first attorney general of Kentucky, so these people know a little something about law, George Nicholas said, and by the way, if the federal government, it was like my daughter Regina was there, if the federal government should try to do something other than what's in this list, if they should try to impose upon us any supplementary condition, then Virginia will be exonerated. Exonerated with this word. Well, that's nullification. We are exonerated because we never agreed that you had the power to do this. Now, who were Randolph and Nicholas? Well, I already told you what their careers were, but they sat on the 5-man commission whose job it was to write up the document by which Virginia would ratify the Constitution. So they've got to write up the document which explains to the world this is how Virginia understands the significance of her ratification of the Constitution. So these were not just a couple of random people. These were among the most significant people at that convention. And there they are basically spelling this out. And so when you get, so Jefferson is just building on this idea. This was just mainstream Virginia political thought. That if you give the federal government a monopoly on interpreting the Constitution, you're interpreting it in its own favor. There's nothing wacky or crazy about that idea. That is obviously true. And that's why nobody enters into any agreement with anybody else and then says, only you get to interpret what this agreement means, and I'll just sit here. No one would do that. Like, who would enter into a recording contract with a record company and say, well, we've got this contract, and whatever you think it means, I'll just abide by it. No one would do that. So likewise here, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it turns out that there is, in U.S. history, a lot of history behind this. It's not just, well, this happened in 1798, and then it never came up again. That's not the case. I hope Steve remembers to stop. I got a lot of say. I hope he remembers to stop, because I don't remember when we started. All right, so now you look through U.S. history. Not 10 years after the New England states are lecturing Virginia Kentucky, how dare you be so uppity? Not 10 years later, they themselves are appealing to these principles because they don't like Jefferson's embargo on New England, an embargo against all the other countries of the world. That's destroying the maritime economy in New England. So they're all up in arms about it. We got to nullify this, we got to not enforce it. In 1809, the governor of Connecticut, Jonathan Trumbull, said that when the federal government goes beyond its constitutional bounds, it falls to the state legislatures to stand between the federal government and their people and be a protecting shield for their people. Now, I put documents like that in this whole document, toward the end of the book. I've got all these documents from northern states, because you know, anytime you talk about states, it's, what do you support slavery? I mean, the level of discussion is so pathetically low. Like, that's as smart as the left can be. I bet you support slavery. Well, at least that was a coherent sentence. That's something. I don't support slavery, for God's sake. But why would nullification need to be used with anything having to do with slavery? The federal government supported slavery. Why would you need to? If anything, the North would want to nullify, and we'll get to that in a minute. Well, 200 years after Jonathan Trumbull made the mistake, a woman in Connecticut named Martha Dean was running as a Republican nominee for Attorney General. And she's having a debate with her opponent, and she says something to the effect of this, that, you know, it's enough, and we've had enough of the states just letting the federal government run roughshod. We need somebody to stand up in the federal government and say, no, we're not going to let you do unconstitutional things in our state. She pulls out a copy of the book, she opens up to Jonathan Trumbull, she starts reading, saying, now, we need that kind of courage today. You should have seen the collective jaw of the whole, everybody there. For a minute, there was like dead silence. They can't compete. This woman is so far off the 3x5 car. Does she even exist? So, I mean, needless to say, all the thought controllers in our society, the Think Progress website, the Media Matters website, whose job it is to police opinion in America. Oh, he said something that's not on the card. And by the way, they don't bother to refute us. We don't deserve to be refuted. I mean, we are rotten people who are not on the 3x5. So all they do is just point out, hey, that guy, he said something we didn't allow him to say, and everybody's supposed to go, ooh, wow, I better run away. I mean, we don't deserve to have our liberties back if we're so pathetically cowed for people like that. So they all immediately jumped on poor Martha Dean. And I wrote to her and I said, I'm sorry if you're getting in trouble on my account. You know, she said, who cares? Somebody's got to say these things. It's like, yeah, all right. Then in 1820, the state of Ohio passed a resolution in the State House saying a majority of the American public supports the idea of state nullification. That's Ohio. Then in the mid-1850s, the legislature and Supreme Court of the state of Wisconsin chime in and say, we believe that there are provisions of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 which are unconstitutional, notwithstanding the Fugitive Slave Clause. And so we're not going to enforce it. So they had, for example, Joshua Glover, a runaway slave, goes up to, he winds up in Wisconsin. And they just simply refuse to turn him over. And they refuse to cooperate, and they won't let the federal government use their jails, and they're doing all this stuff. And cooperate. And how do they justify it? They quoted Jefferson's Kentucky resolutions of 1798 word for word. And they said, we have to preserve our state sovereignty against these federal agents who want to come in here and without a trial, take some guy back into slavery. Well, isn't that funny? Isn't that the exact opposite of what we're told about the relationship between so-called states' rights and slavery? Of course it is. So therefore, how many times is this mentioned in the school classroom? Close to zero? They don't want people to know about this because this might give us ideas we might get out of it. Can't happen. Now, there are objections to nullification, of course. What about the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution? Supremacy Clause says that this Constitution, plus laws which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land, and I'm paraphrasing. And so they say, aha, that goes to show you stupid nullifiers, you can't nullify. The Constitution says federal law trumps state law. That's what every law professor in the land will tell you. Almost every law professor. 99.9 with a bar over it, percent of them will tell you. Now, I don't mean to put down law professors. Hold on, I guess I do. Sorry, I do mean to. Anytime I'm up against a law professor, I don't worry at all. Because I know he's not going to know anything about this. He will know a lot of cases that were all decided wrongly by him. He will know a lot of cases. But he won't know the history of the Constitution. He won't know the ratifying conventions. He won't know that stuff. I don't have to worry about this. And it'll just be Supremacy Clause for half an hour, and that'll be his side of the debate. But of course, what are the key words in Supremacy Clause? This Constitution, plus laws which shall be made in pursuance thereof. In other words, as even Alexander Hamilton said at the New York Ratifying Convention and in Federalist 33, I think it is, he said there's a limit placed on the supremacy of the Congress. It's if what it's doing is constitutional, then it's supreme. But that's the whole point of nullification. It begs the question to say, well, the constitutional laws are the supreme law of the land. Yeah, okay. The point is, what do we do about this law that ain't constitutional? That's the so this supremacy clause just completely ignores the whole issue. Another objection, I'm only going to give this one other one, is wouldn't this be chaotic, right? Don't we need like one nation doing all the same wrong things together? We need unity and stupidity together. Wouldn't it be bad if Iowa said, this policy is ridiculous for us, not to mention unconstitutional? I mean, we've got to resist unconstitutional law, so we're not going to do this. Another state is resisting another unconstitutional law. Wouldn't this just be chaotic? Right? If every state made its own policy on domestic affairs, wouldn't that be terrible? But if every state made its own policy on domestic affairs, my answer would be, welcome to the United States of America. Because that's how it's supposed to work. Like, we're so far from the original intent that when people describe what America is supposed to look like, people are terrified. Oh my gosh, this would be chaos and horrible. No, that would be like America. Because the thing that makes the United States different from other countries of the world is that we're supposed to have a federal system where we are a collection of societies. You notice in the Constitution, the United States is always referred to in the plural to emphasize that it's a collection of societies. It's not primarily a big blob. You know, France is a big blob. England's a big blob. The world has all the blobs it needs. The United States is supposed to be, remember, different. We hear a lot about American exceptionalism. And yet half those people want America to look exactly like France. Well, in what way is America exceptional? It's going to be different. And the way it's different is this federal system. But this federal system does not enforce itself. Notice there are certain amendments that the federal government does enforce and certain ones it doesn't. We're always saying, why don't they listen to the 10th Amendment? But you know what? They do listen to the 16th Amendment. The federal government has never neglected to enforce the 16th Amendment. But yet, funny, the 10th Amendment, well, gee, that just goes, why do you think that is? Okay, it's not going to enforce itself. As a matter of fact, my friend Kevin Goodson, we wrote a book together called Who Killed the Constitution? And he's got a law degree and a PhD in history. He said to me, he said, when I was preparing for the bar exam, I took one of these test-taking courses to cram for the bar exam. And one of the test-taking tips they give you for the multiple-choice section is that if the 10th Amendment is listed as one of the possible answers, you can cross that out. The 10th Amendment is never the right answer on the bar exam. So we've gone from the 10th Amendment being the cornerstone of the whole Constitution, according to Jefferson, to now it's just there to be a wrong answer. Now, is that going to be reversed by just hoping that it gets reversed, or asking them, hey, would you please let us do what we want to do? The whole American Revolution was fought over self-government. That was the principle. The idea of no taxation without representation was just a subset of this larger principle of self-government. And it has gone completely out of our hands. So what is the harm? Now we're seeing more and more states are electronics. We are seeing nullification bills getting passed. So check that out, 10thamendmentcenter.com is the place to keep up with that. But it is happening. People are straying from the 3x5 card, and they are not bursting into flames instantly. It can be done. Speaking of bursting into flames, I said earlier, every American patriot should want to take that 3x5 card, approved opinion, and set a match to it. Because if we continue to play by the rules set out for us by people who despise us, set out for us by the New York Times, we have no right to be surprised when it doesn't work. No, we need to set a match to the 3x5 card, and that fire that burns it into ash will be the flame of American liberty. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Tom. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Have you ever felt more proud of that? Are you feeling more courageous about defending your freedom? Would you like to be a part of taking the message that you just heard and getting it out there and in between more people's ears? That's something that we have as a goal. If you manage a business we want to attend to, with my raffle winners, please head to the registration table to pick up their prizes that they just won. Let's go ahead and get that taken care of. Something I want to talk about briefly is our Patriot Club at the Republican Party Lounge. You should all have one of these, or you should all pick one up on your way out. This is our fundraising mechanism under the leadership of Dr. Ivers. And I'd like to say that today is a great time. If you're happy about the message that you're hearing and the direction you're seeing the party go in Iowa, I'd like to challenge you to help us out with that. To write us a check, to be part of helping propagate this message and lead the party in this manner. Join our Patriot Club. Today, there's no better day than today to join the Patriot Club. For $500, you'll get 2 tickets for this afternoon now at the morning week to come and hang out with Tom Woods and some more of the sponsors for the program. That's going to be a great time. 2 tickets for that. That'll get you 2 tickets for the Rand Fall event down in Cedar Rapids next month. Complimentary, that's part of the package. Tickets to all the other events that we'll have in the next 12 months. All as part of that $500 package and joining the Patriot Club. You'll even get one of these stands and pins. I've donated, I'm a member of our Patriot Club, and I'd really like you to think about joining us and helping us to spread the message like this. I want to point out, too, go see Dr. Ivers. Talk to him about it. He can take your check and get you signed up, explain to you what the program's about, what the vision is that you see described in this brochure. I want to point out, too, come on out to the winery out of Frankston afterwards. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be piles of pizza. Try out some of the best wine in Iowa that you from around here are probably already familiar with. I want to let everybody know, too, we can take credit cards, checks, we can take anything else that they're out there at the event. So come on out. Come on out, $50 a person, or join our Patriot Club today and be a part of our vision for this party for the next 12 months. And I want to share that. It's become apparent, what is this? It's April, right? This is April. What year is this? 2013. Maybe it's been as a bit of a surprise, but not really in politics. It's looking like we're going to have a primary up here in the 1st Congressional District. We have an opportunity. Congressman Bruce Braley is leaving Congress to run for the Senate, being vacated by that competition, obviously, to see who gets the nomination of our party to have that seat. So we have decided that we want to give a couple identified candidates for that nomination up here in First District an opportunity to introduce themselves and say a few words to you today. And one of those candidates is Steve Raji. Steve Raji is somebody I want you to take a look into. He was not able to be here, unfortunately, today. He's a businessman from Cedar Rapids. He had some professional commitments that prevented him from being here, and he sent his regrets as he wanted to be a part of having this opportunity to speak. I'll also share with you that he's just gotten wonderful news that transcends politics, that he's about to become a grandfather. And so we celebrate that with him because that's more important than anything that we'll do here today. But Steve Raji, that's Rathje. I'd like you to look into Steve. He's going to be one of our candidates up here in the First District. And I think he'll be a very viable candidate, and I want you to learn more about him. We do have with us today another gentleman who has declared that he will be a candidate for that seat, and that is Mr. Rod Blum, who is from right here in Dubuque, and a businessman. I want you to check him out, and he's here to have a few words with you. Mr. Rod Blum.
Hello, everyone. Let's try that again. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. I'd like to thank the Republican Party of Iowa for having me here today. It's always great to be with liberty-loving, Constitution-loving people who hear so much about the low information voter. There's certainly plenty of those out there. But people like yourself are definitely not in that group. And it's just awesome to be around people who want to learn more. It's also good to see my good friend Patrick Barron. I have the pleasure to meet, and we email often, and I ask him a lot of questions, and he gets a lot of patience, and learn more about economics as I go, so Patrick, thank you very much. And I also want to thank my grassroots supporters who are out there. You guys rock. Before I get started, I have an 83-year-old mother, and I stop by her house when I'm in town and cook her dinner. Usually it's microwave. We'll get carried away too far. And she told me a joke yesterday, and she made me promise I would tell it to the group. So here's my 83-year-old mother's joke. The husband and wife are walking on the beach, come across the bottle. They pick the bottle up, and of course, out pops a genie. And the genie says, I'll grant you each a wish. So the husband, he doesn't even pause for a second. He happens to be a Democrat. And he says, I wish for everlasting life. And the genie said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. That's the one wish I cannot grant. Then he turns to the woman who says, what's your wish? She's a Republican. She thinks for a minute or two, and she said, I have it. I wish to die the day after Congress balances the budget. As I walked in the back of the room, the first words I heard out of Tom Wood's mouth was, most congressmen don't have PhDs. I don't know what he meant by that. And I hate to interject politics into this academic setting today, which is wonderful. We're all learning a lot. But at the end of the day, we have 535 people in Washington, D.C. who spend over $3.6 trillion of your dollars every year. And my guess is most of them could not pass an 8th grade economics exam. In fact, Tom and I were talking, he mentioned the return of the bailout. Our president, George Bush, I'll never forget the quote was, we have to suspend the rules of the free market to save the free market. Of course, they Nancy Pelosi who said we have to sign the bill so that you can find out what's in the bill. And I could go on forever with these comments. Proof positive, I guess anybody can be in Congress or President of the United States. It's interesting, it's like a homecoming to me. 30 years ago, I was sitting in those chairs, and I was getting my master's degree in business here at the University of Dubuque. And our president was Ronald Reagan. And I wasn't worried about getting a job at that time. Because our economy, when I was here at the University of Dubuque, was growing between 6 and 10% a year. And the reason it was growing is Ronald Reagan understood countries cannot tax and spend or print and spend their way to prosperity. Regulations, decreased taxes, made the tax code flatter, and he had a strong dollar policy. And our economy took off. The result was, I think, the greatest expansion of our economy since World War II. What do we have today? Reagan decreased regulations, President Obama increased regulations. Reagan decreased taxes, President Obama increased taxes. President Reagan made the tax system flatter, President Obama makes it more graduated, correct? And President Reagan had Paul Volcker as his chairman of the Federal Reserve, and Paul Volcker refused to print money. I'm 58 years old. I never thought I'd see the day where we're monetizing debt and printing money at the rate that we are today. And this is the reason we're in economic malaise. This is the reason the economy is barely growing. We need to get the government off the back of entrepreneurs and business people and job creators, which I'm one of. Let them do their thing. Get government out of the way. And our economy will have an economic rebirth like we had under President Reagan. I just want to tell you briefly, because I know I only have so many minutes, about the 5 cornerstones of our campaign. There are also things I believe that make this country one of the greatest countries on the face of the earth. First, personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. Government should not do for a person that which they can do for themselves. I think we would agree, a nation of victims. We're becoming a dependency nation. That is the plan of the Democrat Party, because they know a dependent voter is a dependable vote. Dependable voters are dependable vote. We have 100 million of your fellow Americans receiving some type of federal welfare every year. 48 million on food stamps. And President Obama just released his 10-year budget, $8.2 trillion. 8.2 trillion with a T. It means test and transfer payments, which is government speak for welfare over the next 10 years. Well, dependency, my friends, I'm sure you would agree, is like a cancer. And it eats away at your body. This dependency eats away at a person and the country. It robs a person of their human dignity and their self-esteem. And we've got to become a fiercely independent country than the government dependency. And by the way, it pays more now not to get up in the morning and go to work. It pays more than to go to work. And that should never happen in the United States of America. Second thing, second cornerstone of our campaign, constitutionally limited government. I don't think we have a constitutionally limited government when 40% of our GDP is government spending. Federal, state, and local. That is not my definition of a limited government. I don't think a limited government goes around the world in nation builds. I don't think a limited government tries to restrict our access to the internet with laws like SOPA, HIPAA, and CISPA. I believe the Republican movement, the conservative liberty movement, whatever kind of movement you want to call it, the greatest tool we have is the internet. So my message to President Obama and the Democrats that I'm in Washington is keep your hands off my internet. I don't think a limited government indefinitely detains citizens without due process of law. I don't think a limited government nationalizes the sixth of our economy called health care. Cornerstone of our campaign, fiscal sanity. And in groups like this, it's usually a laugh line, and I don't need to say anything more. But our federal debt, we all know, is around approaching $17 trillion, and our GDP is around $16 trillion. Now, most economists will not agree on most things, correct, Patrick? But I think most economists would agree that when your GDP, your debt to GDP ratio is over 100%, like ours is, bad things happen. half. So by point of reference, Greece, they're about 150, 60% GDP, debt to GDP. Italy, same type of story. The United States of America, 107%. We're on the same path as Greece and Italy. So this isn't a theory. We can just look to Europe and see what could happen in this country. And once again, if taxing and spending is the key to prosperity, Greece and Italy will be economic powerhouses. I'm sure you agree. Fourth cornerstone of our campaign, fourth thing I truly believe in is free markets and competition. I know of no better way to increase the quality of any product, increase the quantity of the product, and decrease the price of it than through free markets and through competition. And though education is not a federal issue, in fact, I would vote yes to eliminate the Federal Department of Education. That will increase the quality of that product. We need to, I will vote 100% of the time, if I don't put my feet to the fire, please, to eliminate crony capitalism. Yeah. I am more concerned today about the amount of money that people that are advantaged get from the federal government than those that are disadvantaged. The poster child for crony capitalism, $14 billion in profits 2 years ago, and the amount of taxes they paid in the United States was zero. That has got to stop. I think we need to lower our corporate tax rates, which are the highest in the world, and eliminate 100% of the corporate welfare crony capitalism. Sanctity of life, I believe, is important. I don't think we can be great as a nation when we are legally murdering over 1 million unborn children a year. And it's not only the protection of the unborn that's a pro-life issue, it's a protection of the born. And I think particularly with Obamacare, and they've been referred to as death panels, I think they're called the IPAP panel, making decisions on end of life. I do not want in the hospital room with myself and my 83-year-old mother, a government bureaucrat saying whether we should pull the plug on her or not. Before Steve comes up here with a book, am I doing all right, Steve? No time left. Okay. The part I'm going to cut out is what a great guy you are. I'll leave you with this. As I travel on the 20 counties in the 1st District, I often get asked, what can I do on one person? People feel helpless. And I'm always reminded of the words of Samuel Adams, one of our founding fathers. And yes, there was a time in my life when I thought Samuel Adams was just weird. I have to admit it. But he said Samuel Adams said it doesn't take a majority to prevail. Rather, it takes an irate, tireless minority who are willing to set brush fires of freedom and liberty in the minds of their fellow citizens. So I ask you, I implore you to do that. Elections are won or lost over the neighbor's fence. You have to go out and witness. You have to go out and talk about the things you learned today and the principles of the Republican Party. And if you do that, if we all do that, we will take this back in 2014. We'll block Obama's agenda for 2 years until we get a Republican in the White House in 2016. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We oppose any form of compulsory national service. Congress alone has the authority majority to go to war. We're starting to see a change in the way people in this country think about our foreign policy. And you're seeing that change in our party, and that's reflected in the platform. People are starting to think that endless, undeclared, unconstitutional, no-win wars of policing the world and nation building are fair to our troops. It's not making us more safe, and it's bankrupting us as a nation. I'm glad that Dr. Woods is going to speak about foreign policy today because he's a scholar in that regard as well. At this time, I want him to come forward again for our last presentation, Dr. Tom Woods.
Okay, can you believe it? What is this, some kind of a Groundhog Day thing? All right, well, we just have to go through one more of these, and I have some quotations I want to share with you. Okay, so right now we're going to talk about the foreign policy issue, the third rail when it comes to all this stuff. Because so far we all get along great. People seem to like what I'm saying. That's great. So now I'm probably going to have to cash in some of the capital that I've built up. I used to be one of these people who was very skeptical of government power. Right? The government's out to get us, and it's always, it's always taxing me, or somebody's on the take who's been elected, and graft is being spread around. The government engages in propaganda, telling me what to eat and what to drink. And it turns out it's wrong more than half the time. It turns out I should eat the exact opposite of what they tell me. So I just didn't trust a thing these people did, or at least I didn't give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they might be right once